Hello, everybody. It is Saturday, August the 16th, 2025. Saturday is our tech show with my old friend Keith Teare, the publisher of That Was the Week, the authoritative weekly tech newsletter. Last week, Keith's headline was AI native software and hardware is here, which I translated in my own way as the week that AI began to have a mind of its own. It began to act, the dawn of an AI Stone Age, a huge week. And it seems as if we've had many huge weeks in AI in 2025. This week, perhaps history is beginning to slow down a little bit. Keith's headline is When AI Breaks Your Heart, and he's focusing on the reaction to Sam Altman's bumpy GPT-5 rollout when people begin to be nostalgic about previous generations of AI. So, Keith, was this the week that nothing changed, where we went back to normal?
Actually, I think you could argue that, but you could argue the opposite as well, which is the week when everyone realized that human beings are treating these AIs as if they're human. They're forming bonds with AIs, and they're experiencing loss when the AI algorithm changes, and their friend, if you will, seemed to have a personality transplant. There was quite a big backlash. Funnily enough, it was mainly female AI users lamenting the loss of boyfriend replacements.
So this was the week that all the female users of AI lost their boyfriends.
Kind of. I'm a bit worried that might sound sexist, and it's not intended to.
Well,
but
Keith, you've never been sexist. That would be unthinkable for you, wouldn't it? Or me, for that matter.
Correct.
So the editorial this week is about what you call the pain of change. Is that what we're going through? Is the pain manifold, not only in terms of obviously the transformation to the economy, jobs, stuff that we've talked about endlessly on this show this year and last year, but also becoming used to AI, one kind of AI or another, and then another one comes along and we're not quite sure what to make of it and how to behave?
Yes, and it's the pain of change in two different ways. It's the user's pain, with all of their assumptions and certainties being transformed and they can't trust it anymore because it's now changed. But it's also OpenAI's reaction to that was to change back by bringing back what they had closed down, which was ChatGPT 4.0. And so it's the accommodation of the agents of change to the resistance to change. Which is kind of interesting on the face of it, because the one group of people you don't want to slow down are those making the changes. But certainly this week, ChatGPT did slow down and had to spend pretty much the whole week in a PR crisis, talking about what went wrong and why it won't go wrong again.
Yeah, the photo for people watching this, the photo from Keith's link on TechCrunch is of Sam Altman looking very much like a character out of a Star Trek movie. You and I, we've always disagreed over OpenAI. I'm a OpenAI skeptic on lots of fronts. You're an optimist. Was this the week then that OpenAI stumbled or became all too human? Is this the week that they began to understand that they have customers that they have to adapt to? So was it a good or a bad week for OpenAI?
Strangely, it was both. It was a good week if you look at it through the prism of technology. GPT-5 is far better at more things than any prior model that they've had. So at a technical level, it was a step forward, and it put them at the top or near top of every single measure of AI's usefulness. On the other hand, Sam Altman proved that he's no Elon Musk. Elon Musk is
better or worse. I mean, you're a Musk fanboy, Keith. So you're saying that's a bad thing?
I would say it's a bad thing because I'm talking about decisiveness and sticking to your goals and driving through the pain in order to get to whatever your goals are. which Musk does. He takes a lot of inbound fire and he just takes it. Altman is super sensitive and reacted by slowing things down. And
well, he wants to be seen. I mean, let's face it. He's a much better promoter of himself. He's much better at developing his own brand than Musk, for better or worse. So I'm guessing that Sam Altman isn't a particularly sensitive fellow, but he wants to appear sensitive.
Well, he lost face with me this week because I want him to be far more decisive and stronger. I don't want him pandering to
women. You don't want him pandering to women, Keith, do you?
Or anyone. I don't want him pandering to anyone that isn't consistent with his end goals.
Well, what's his end goals?
His end goal is clearly stated. It's artificial superintelligence, starting with artificial general intelligence. And he's nowhere near there. I mean, we're talking about the very early days of that journey. And he's already allowing user feedback to detract him, pretty much 100% this week. So I would definitely say it raised some questions in my mind. Now you could say if you were a PR person, you'd say this was a great week for him because he showed he can manage a crisis. But he managed it by stopping things.
Well, I could have two headlines this week, Keith. Either the week that everything changed once again, or the week that nothing changed. And one piece that you pick out in your newsletter this week speaks of the lack of change. Stanford is sticking with its legacy admissions, Stanford being the heart of Silicon Valley, both metaphorically and literally in geographical terms. What do you make of this story? It's not really a tech story, though it has significant implications for the tech community. How can Stanford, which is supposed to be the ultimate disruptor, stick with its legacy admissions?
Well, it's economic self-interest. I have a few friends who are Stanford grads who can afford to make donations.
I have a wife who's a Stanford grad. In fact, last year she won the Governor's Award for contributions to the university. So I'm all too familiar with Stanford.
There you go. So I don't know if she makes donations, but Stanford lives off alumni.
Far too many.
She certainly is not alone in that, because alumni donations are a big thing. So taking the children of alumni on a fast track to acceptance is an economic self-interest decision that kind of perpetuates a feudal system. The son of the king will become the king. And Stanford is, if anything, a feudal institution at that level. Now, in other ways, it's the opposite. Like it's a shocking stat, but only 22% of Stanford new entrants are white, which obviously massively understates how many whites are on balance in society, and probably understates their academic excellence.
22? Are you sure about that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
22% of people who the freshman class of Stanford are white.
Yeah.
And then what's the rest? Green? Brown?
I don't know, because the article I read only talked about the
well, I think we may have to have a whole show on that, Keith. I think you've got to be a little careful, but I'm not sure that's entirely true.
When you think of it, it's not shocking, because at the same time, academia is both woke and self-serving, which appear to be opposites, but they're not. It's all about, similar to Sam Altman, adapting to what you think people want.
Although the contradictions. I mean, if Stanford is indeed sticking to its legacy admissions, the vast majority of Stanford grads, at least historically, are white. So I'm not sure how those two things are compatible, but that's another issue. Maybe
you cut me off before the end of my sentence. I was going to say, doing what people want while serving your own self-interest resolutely on the things that you don't want them to be able to influence you on, like money raising. So it is it's a fairly accurate representation of how society is.
Although I have to say that, as someone who's lived in America a long time, white Americans aren't particularly smart. So the fact that there's only 22% get into Stanford doesn't necessarily surprise me. It probably reflects their IQ, but maybe I'm a bit biased there. So the alternative headline, things are changing, comes with another interesting piece that you take from O'Reilly Radar from Mike Lukides, which is entitled "The Abstractions They Are A-Changing," borrowed, of course, from the great Bob Dylan. What are the abstractions and how are they changing? And why does that suggest that maybe this was the week once again where everything changed?
Well, this is very aligned to our show last week. What Mike is saying, and Mike's a long-standing O'Reilly collaborator for decades, is that the age of prompting AI and getting an answer is gone. We're now at the stage where giving AI context and driving it by supplying it with enough information to be good when it does its research and its thinking is upon us. And that means that, clever engineering of prompts becomes the primary success criteria for using an AI. And I think that's been true for quite a long time. He's saying it's becoming more true, which I think the shipping of GPT-5, which has these different modes, reasoning, thinking, and so on, brings it into relief. But it's certainly true that if you just give AI a single sentence prompt, you will get what you deserve, which is an answer, but not necessarily the best answer. So our expectations of ourselves using AI have to go up.
Yeah, so it's rather like our show. If I ask you the right question, Keith, you give an interesting answer. If I ask a dumb question, you give a dumb answer. Another piece that suggests things maybe aren't changing is, and this is one area that you really know a lot about, that you spend your day job on, is the venture community. Headline that venture has never been more concentrated. 40% plus of VC money is going to just 10 deals. So again, not much to report on there. This has been a trend ever since I've been in Silicon Valley for the last 25 years. It's more and more of a winner-take-all economy and investment economy. Does that again suggest that maybe things aren't changing as much as we think or would like to think?
Things are changing quantitatively, but you're right that this is not a new trend. It's what we often call the power law. And the power law is not just a venture capital law. I think it's a capitalist law, which is the winners win bigger than everyone else. Look at the top 7 companies on the stock exchange and what percentage of growth they account for is huge. So the power law, which graduates out of Stanford go on to be societal leaders, it's a small number. So the power law is pretty much a capitalist law. And the idea that there should be equality is not even an intelligent thought, because in real world, there is no equality. There are totally different outcomes driven by different inputs that lead to concentrations of both wealth and power.
Yeah, and those that you're an old Marxist or previous ex-old Marxist, or you're an old man with an ex-Marxist background, maybe not so old. I mean, the Marxists from Marx to Lenin to Rosa Luxemburg to modern economists like Barron and Sweezy, they all talked about the monopolistic nature of capitalism. So again, it doesn't seem as if much is changing.
Yeah, although I'd criticize, in quotes, Marxists for this monopoly.
Well, I'm not blaming the Marxists. I'm saying this is their observation about capitalism.
Yeah,
I
think there's some truth, but they're mostly wrong, because almost nothing becomes a monopoly. But it does become powerful and concentrated, and the rich do get richer relative to the poor. The poor get richer as well, by the way. That's one thing they all miss. So it's the relative difference that widens, but everyone is uplifted, and technology
more than others, though. I mean, it's the old Animal Farm quote about some are more equal than others. I mean, I'd rather be in one of those 10 deals than everywhere else. And there must be a lot of startups, Keith, AI startups scratching around for money and wishing that they were in that top 10 class.
Yeah, well, you can't be unless you have a chance of owning a major part of the future. And that's what early investors are trying to gauge. Is there a chance of this company owning a big part of the future that's valuable? And in the case of Anthropic and OpenAI, even despite your skepticism, I think you'd agree that there is a chance that they will.
No. Let me be clear on OpenAI. I don't think it's, it's not Enron. It's not a fraud. I'm just not quite sure it's the $10 trillion company that you talked about a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah.
So I'm still thinking that I'm going to use the headline "The Week That Nothing Changed." Another interesting piece you picked out from the always intelligent Noah Smith, who will actually profit from the AI boom. Seems as if the companies profiting are always the companies in these boom times that aren't really the core tech companies, like the energy companies, like NVIDIA. What does Smith say about the real beneficiaries of the boom?
Well, again, he's focused on the power law. He's showing how it's a barbell. So most of the gain goes to a small number of people on one side of the barbell. Everyone else kind of benefits. Society certainly benefits. But the concentration of wealth is kind of built in. And I don't think of that as a critical remark. I just think it's a factual remark. And I've always thought and still think that unless very large companies get very wealthy, you can't really have the revolutions that technology is able to drive, because those revolutions need leadership, and leadership needs resources. And the speed at which things change is completely correlated with that leadership and their resources. So it is what it is. It doesn't mean that the end result will be bad. I mean, I don't want the end result that we have.
No one's talking about that. You're oversensitive today, Keith. No one's suggesting that. They're just suggesting that this is a classic boom, and the beneficiaries of classic booms are the companies that provide, like in the gold rush of the 1840s, the companies that really benefit are not the finders of the gold, but the people who clothe the miners. There's nothing bad. That's just a reality.
Right. And Noah Smith makes the example of how the railroads benefited, in an earlier era, how the telephone companies benefited during the mobile boom. And he makes the point that AI data centers and energy providers are likely to benefit now. And all of that's true, but those are the preconditions for much bigger benefits, which you and me experienced through using tools that weren't available to us before. So yes, there's a CapEx, capital expenditure cost of distributing a new technology to billions of people. I don't think anyone would argue that cost is prohibitive. It's just part and parcel of being able to achieve optimal results from current technology.
Although there was an interesting, you didn't run it, but it's an interesting piece in the Times this week, a major piece about, and I think that the energy story of AI is a really important one, about how big tech's AI data centers are driving up electricity bills for everyone. I mean, the New York Times says they have headlines that makes everyone angry at tech. But if that's true, then it might counter some of your optimism.
Yeah, but I would argue the primitive nature of the US grid is driving up energy prices. The demand for energy should be a fantastic thing for the grid. The only reason it isn't is the grid is so 19th century. It hasn't been upgraded. The Chinese grid is not struggling. The American grid is. And so prices are going up here. Prices are going down in China. So it's really all about tech. It's an interesting fact. America has about 200 nuclear submarines. That is to say, they're powered by nuclear reactors. And these are mini reactors capable of giving power to an entire city. There isn't even one of them on the ground in America feeding electricity to a city. So the problem with energy is lack of innovation. And by the way, nothing new to be invented. Just using current techniques, they could bring down the price of electricity by investing in modern power generation.
Yeah, and I did actually, one of my other, we'll talk about my interview of the week, but I did an interview with a young woman activist, a Brazilian activist who happens to be the wife of Joe Gebbia, Isabel Bamake, who is a nuclear power activist. I was a bit suspicious, got myself, I think, a little bit into trouble with her on the interview, but maybe I should have given her more of the benefit of the doubt. So I think that the power story is a very important one in the AI revolution, and we've talked about that previously in the show. Another reason why maybe this is the week that nothing changed, in terms of big transformations, you always get the stories, Keith, where somebody says, storytelling will be the skill of the future. It's always the default for when people have no idea of what the future is going to be. They always fall back on storytelling. I know you quote this piece. Is it more or less true in 2025 than it was with the invention of the internet or social media? I don't even know what is storytelling? I don't know what that means. You know who comes up with the term storytelling? People who don't even read, who have no idea what storytelling is.
Well, I put this in because I think it correlates to the O'Reilly piece about context, and the fact that AI needs context. I think that storytelling is what humans use to convey meaning to each other, and they do it in lots of different contexts. It can be selling things, it could be teaching things, it could be trying to get political acceptance of ideas. Human beings storytell, and that's we also write papers and patents and so on. But at the end of the day, the way most people learn about something is through the storytelling of it.
But what does that mean? Are we telling stories now? Are we having a conversation? I never know what the word means.
Yeah, you and me are telling two different stories today. I'm telling the story of resistance to change, and you're telling the story of, is there any change, yes or no? But they're both stories. It's trying to frame this week's news. And framing it makes it accessible. So without the storytelling, everyone's left drowning in a sea of words. But once you put context around it and you get a sense of the past, the present, and the future as seen from the point of view of today, it starts to be accessible. And so it's a key skill.
Well, let's continue with our story of the week of August the 16th. A couple of smaller pieces of news. We've talked about OpenAI. This was the week that Anthropic takes aim at OpenAI, according to TechCrunch at least, by offering Claude to all three branches of the US government for $1. I'm not sure where the price is that important when it comes to the government, but is there now the emergence of a two-pronged war, a superpower war between Anthropic and OpenAI? Is that a fantasy of Anthropic? I mean, clearly OpenAI is a leader. Are Anthropic also?
Anthropic's a clear number two, by easily, and I do think the future is going to be divided between them in some proportion. There'll be other players as well who are smaller, but those are the big two. And so the land grab of trying to acquire customers, which by the way, it's ridiculous that would be about price. When you're talking about AI, it's really about quality. And Anthropic have the best quality when it comes to, for example, coding. ChatGPT have the best quality on some other things. And the competition ultimately is going to be which one serves my needs the best. But they both do a really good job of serving lots of different needs. I think that the biggest land grab is the land grab both of them are participating in, which is moving from the browser to the chat interface as the primary entry point and delivery point of inputs and outputs from AI.
And in that context, you've created an excellent segue to the question of Perplexity. It's not entirely clear. I'm, shall we say, perplexed a little bit with Perplexity. This was the week that they offered $34.5 billion to buy Google Chrome. Of course, there are rumors that the judge in the Google antitrust case will require Google to sell Chrome. But is Perplexity fighting the old war? Why would it want Chrome if, as you're saying, there's this fundamental shift from the browser to the interface? Is Google Chrome worth $34, let alone 34.45 billion? And what exactly is Perplexity in this new world, or what could it be?
Yeah. Well, you have to remember that Google pays Apple about $20 billion a year for Safari, a year, not as a one-off fee. And that's because the browser's value is equal to the traffic it carries and the links to be clicked on that are in that traffic. And so the value of a browser is equal to the value of the advertising economy that is inside of it. So actually 34 billion is a massive underpricing of Chrome, because Chrome's far bigger than Safari. And even at that, Perplexity, in order to afford it, if Google would sell it for that much, they'd be nuts.
Well, they wouldn't, because they don't need the money. I mean, they would only sell it if they have to.
Right. And once you do the math, it's worth about 10 times that. So, you know, it's a bit of a fake story, but it does shine a light on the and by the way, OpenAI has stated to Google that if they are actually serious about selling it, OpenAI would want to buy it as well without putting.
Well, everybody knows they're not serious. They don't need the money. They'll only do it if they have to. But coming back to the question of Perplexity, you've talked about Anthropic being the number 2 player in the market. There's certainly no room for 3. There may not even be room for 2. What is Perplexity trying to do? Is it a viable player in this new world?
Well, I think technically it's excellent, because it's a hybrid between AI and web search. And the hybrid character of it makes it better at web search than Google. So if you were to use Perplexity as your primary search engine, you wouldn't be disappointed. It's very good. It's less good if you're looking to buy something, because it doesn't really have a product catalog, you know, like Google does, and it doesn't own all the links that point to products like Google does. So it's less good for some things, but for most things, it's way better than Google.
But is it fighting? I mean, it reminds me of the First World War. If you're trying to sort of breed super horses to fight a war, and then someone comes along with tanks, is Perplexity fighting the wrong battle?
I don't think so, because it doesn't have its own large language model, at least not a good one. So it's not really part of the Anthropic OpenAI war. What it's done is built a discovery experience, a research experience around and on top of the LLMs. So if you pay Perplexity, you're going to be using OpenAI or Anthropic as your AI.
So it's essentially an AI-powered browser.
It's an AI-powered browser, but they don't own a browser. They've just released Comet to some people, so they're ambitious to own a browser. One of the points I make in my editorial is that that may be a backward-looking decision, as in they're making the assumption that the browser remains the center of gravity for navigation and content. I think OpenAI and Anthropic are showing us that might not be true.
Right, and the way I use Anthropic, I'm increasingly asking it to find me links on the web. So I don't personally have any, I don't sense a need personally for Perplexity. I know you're more of a fan. Our mutual friend Steve Gilmore uses Perplexity. So there are people who find it useful.
Yes, and well, because it's useful. It is useful.
But is it useful in the old world rather than in the new world?
I think it's useful in the present, insofar as the old world still survives. It will over time get less and less useful.
I'm not making jokes about old people like the two of us and Steve Gilmore in the long run. Finally, or maybe not so finally, I had a little bit of a coup this week. I had the good fortune to get Geoffrey Hinton, the winner of the 2024 Nobel Prize for Physics, on my show. He's called the AI Godfather. It was a thrill talking to him. I know you saw the interview, Keith. What did you think?
Well, I think you have to contextualize Geoffrey Hinton. AI Godfather is a bit of an overstatement. He's a long-standing AI pathbreaker and researcher, mainly at Google, but also in academia. He's super smart. He knows the field very, very well. And as long as AI was underpowered, he was very comfortable with it. The minute that OpenAI released ChatGPT, he started deviating to fear and doubt, which he's now firmly in the camp of, and is to some extent making wild statements. In your interview, he, for example, said he thought there was a 15 to 20% chance of OpenAI wiping out the human race. And when you asked him, why, he said, well, I'm guessing because I have no clue. And I think I have no clue is probably the truth.
He acknowledged that, but so I take your point. But what that suggests to me is that if Hinton doesn't know, nobody knows. I mean, this is a complete mystery.
I think there's two thoughts in my mind. The first is AI taking over is a ridiculous concept because AI is 100% controlled by the humans who program it. And it's completely possible to put constraints around its fields of action that rule out any such thing. And the idea that it could develop, separate from its programming is just bizarre. And anyone who's a programmer knows that, which Geoffrey Hinton should. So the first thought is, well, this is just a ridiculous conversation. The second thought is, no one knows the future anyway. So I always remember Cristiano Ronaldo when he was asked, will he leave Manchester United, knowing fully well that he would, said, well, nobody knows the future. It turns out he did know the future because it was under his control. Well, the future of AI is under the control of the engineers who build it. So it's entirely...
Well, it depends. Yeah, I mean, it is and it isn't. In terms of, before, there was something else I wanted to talk about, the Hinton interview, but in terms of the way in which we can shape, you and I have had ongoing conversations about regulation, but there was an interesting piece, you didn't include it, I sent you the link in the FT on the plunge in traffic of Pornhub in the UK after age verification. I'm not suggesting that AI gets as aggressively regulated as Pornhub in the UK, but it does suggest that regulation is possible. And I'm guessing most people would agree that porn should be age regulated so that 5-year-olds shouldn't have access to Pornhub.
Yeah, I did include the EFF piece about that same topic, and I think you sent me the thing after I'd already finished the newsletter, so I'm sorry I didn't put it in. But look, state regulation of content is obviously going to happen, and some of it is just common sense, like porn not being available to a 5-year-old. But the broader implications in the UK are interesting. Age verification is becoming a requirement of pretty much all internet use because of this specific rule. So this specific rule doesn't just pertain to Pornhub. Pornhub's traffic has gone down because of it, but everyone in the UK has to prove their age now in lots of different circumstances. So you know that experience you have when you go to a European site of being asked to approve cookies. Well, now it's compounded by having to prove your age. And the extent to which the state gets between, free will and yourself is growing massively. So the EFF piece I did include talks about the implications of that for a surveillance society, which I think is accurate.
Let's finally go, in terms of the Hinton conversation, go back to another comment he said. There's a headline about it, about a speech he made in our conversation. He argued that the only way to keep humans safe is to giving AI what he called maternal instincts. What did you think of that, Keith?
Well, firstly, what are maternal instincts? I know many women, and very few of them have the same instincts. It's not as if there is a characteristic of females called maternal instinct.
Right. And in fact, when he said that, I asked him about Mrs. Thatcher, and he was not entirely sure what to say in response.
Well, I just think about my wife. I mean, sometimes she will say to our kids, "I wish you were never born," usually justified by the context. And that is part of a maternal instinct, as is, "I love you and don't hurt yourself." So maternal instincts covers a very wide range of emotions, from extreme anger all the way to extreme love. So the whole idea that there is a thing called maternal instincts is essentially an anti-male. It's assuming that males can't be balanced, emotionally balanced, which of course they can.
Can't be trusted. But I wonder what it suggests is that a computer scientist, a man very talented, obviously, in math, in physics, he just won the Nobel Prize for Physics, should say something like that about the development of maternal instincts for AI. What does that suggest about maybe our culture, and whether or not we should rely on technologists like Geoffrey Hinton to, if not build the future, certainly determine it?
I think what it means is in the competition between innovating competence in AI versus guardrails and safety, his brain is 90% guardrails and safety, which means that he's stopped being a change agent. He started being a friction. And when you become a friction in a process, the people who are making the change are going to ignore you. And so he's basically turning himself into an irrelevance in his field, in his chosen field, by making statements like that.
Well, maybe he's like the women who complained about GPT-5. Maybe he shares the maternal instincts towards technology. Finally, Keith, you had we don't always do startups of the week, but you had a really good startup of the week this week. Post from Josh Koppelman, one of Silicon Valley's leading investors, VC futurists. He gave a link to a company called TestFlight, which seems very intriguing. Tell us about them.
TestFlight's the Apple platform where you can test new apps, and the app's called Torch. If you look inside it, it says Torch.
Right, so it's Torch on TestFlight.
That's correct. And anyone can install TestFlight. And if you get invited, I got invited this morning to install Torch, so I installed it, and it read all of my medical records with my permission. And it started to analyze all my lab results and everything, and gave me a pretty complete picture of my health from all the different sources I gave it access to. You know, including my blood work, and whether my blood sugar is too high, or whether my heart is able to withstand what's called a stress test, which I had this week at my doctor, all kinds of stuff. So it's a very specific application of AI in the health field that's very personalized to you.
Very logical. I mean, I'm doing a show on Monday with Robert Pearl, who's my resident health guru. He used to run Kaiser Permanente. He teaches at Stanford. He's a big AI advocate. I mean, this seems a no-brain application of AI to medical.
Yeah, agreed. And Josh Koppelman's very good at spotting trends early.
So this is a big deal. So we should be, investing in Torch, using Torch?
Using it, I'd say. Investing in it's probably impossible unless you're Sequoia or Andreessen Horowitz or someone.
So they're probably one of the 10 that are concentrating.
I'll say this: that my post of the week this week tells the opposite story. Things you shouldn't invest in, but they did anyway.
Right. Well, that's our final segment of the show, and the post of the week is from a certain K Tier. You got a bit of a cheat, Keith, posting your own post of the week.
Actually, the post of the week is really the one I'm commenting on, but I wanted my comment to come up as well. This is about a British guy, actually, who's had the smart idea, which we're all going to hate him for, of building a search engine optimization platform, trying to force links into AI answers. just how they currently force links into Google by trying to game the Google algorithms. And so SEO is the worst nightmare for AI because it's an attempt to degrade it by making it less intelligent and force-fed the links that his clients want him to force feed.
So who's gonna buy it on that? I'm guessing that, and this is from a British entrepreneur called James Cadwallader. Who's going to buy it on that? I'm guessing that OpenAI and Anthropic would be very ambivalent in the same way as Google in the early days was very anti-advertising.
Yeah, I think Anthropic and OpenAI do and will want links to be surfaced in the right context, and they will want to get paid if they're driving value to the owner of the link. What they will not want is SEO companies trying to game them to force links in that they wouldn't themselves choose to put there.
Yeah, but they, as Google found in the early days, they also need to make money. I wonder whether Perplexity would be more open to Cadwallader's business. But it does suggest, Keith, that maybe things aren't changing as much as you'd think. We're back to the old question of how to actually monetize. And SEO is annoying, but is a very lucrative way of making money from technology.
Yeah, actually, there's no way for him to succeed technically. So I predict he's going to fail. But Thomas Tungers this week has an article about databases and AI. And the root of being able to actually solve the problem of links in AI is the ability of AI to read databases, which it currently can't do. So I think there is a big area of technical improvement that people are focusing on, which is all to do with data and AI.
Well, that was the week, but nothing changed. That's my headline. Keith will probably disagree. His headline was, that was the week when AI broke your heart, the pain of change. Maybe we agree, maybe we don't. One thing for sure is Keith and I will be back next week. Have a great week, Keith, and we will talk again next week, no doubt, about Perplexity, OpenAI, Anthropic, and this revolution that might or might not be changing everything. Thank you so much.
Bye, everyone.